So this is getting really into a lot of things about how leftness and rightness works and the lower and upper trigrams, lower and upper colors, left and right tones, and lots of other things about the masculine and feminine. The core of this, you could say, is about balancing the masculine and the feminine. The balance of it really is individual circuitry, and this is like the first two parts of a three-part thing that I created. The last part of it I already showed you guys with the throat video that looked at individual circuitry and mutation and all that stuff. That's like the last part of it. This is the first two parts that lead up to that. Now, you know, human design is an amazing thing. It's really accurate, and people always want to look at their information and find out who they are, you know, who they are. Who am I, right? Well, you can use human design to find out who you really are. But what is human design, really? We have the left and the right that I'm always talking about. And it's sort of like with all kinds of things. We have the left and right politically. We have left and right brain. We have masculine and feminine. We have these polarities. We have these dualities. But there's like a meta contrast. Michael Tessarian calls it the meta contrast that is used in order to split people's thinking, actually, so that they don't come into union or unity, because things are easy to control when they're separated. You know the whole saying, divide and conquer, right? And that's basically what goes on with this. Of course, there's truth and reality to all of this. But if we get too caught up in the natures of it, and especially when it comes to like one side wanting to blame the other side, you know, there's a problem over here. The left part of ourselves that's looking at particles and things in particular might look at the right part of ourselves as being some kind of problem because it's out of control. Or the right part of ourselves may look at the left part of ourselves as being either not enough or too controlling or something like that, which we'll get into eventually. But, you know, in looking at the body graph in general and with your particular placements and everything, people always assume that that's who they are, like that's who they really are. But what has Ra always said about it? It's the mechanics of the Maya, meaning it's the mechanics of the illusion. That's what Maya means. It's illusion. So when you're looking at human design websites and human design articles and things and everything everybody is saying about human design, it's all about find your true self. This is who you really are. This is the truth. This is your real self. I don't know if that's true necessarily, because it's an illusion of separateness. It's a very enticing, seductive, and accurate illusion. You know, it doesn't change what it is. And when we're using human design in order to like further segregate ourselves from the world and from other people, this creates a funny kind of problem. It creates a funny conundrum. And it's actually really ironic considering where humanity is right now in our state of evolution, that we're using human design to like drive further wedges between ourselves and other people and within our experience, and trying to define everybody and everything in just the right way so they can live correctly and all this kind of stuff. When all of that just might be a big fat illusion, and that a part of ourselves might actually be able to transcend these supposed rules and everything that are all over human design. Of course, there's accurate information within it. It's really fascinating. I love to explore it. It's really fun. But we have to take into account the other part of ourselves that is free from this. That is not, you could say it's the unconditional part of ourselves. And that's kind of an interesting thing human design might actually teach us, like the unconditional part of ourselves, because everything about human design is about conditions. You either have this or you don't. You're either like this or you're not. You either have this or you don't. Oh, you're like that. And it's all about really defining people, defining things, and relegating them to only a certain tiny, narrow possibility of how their life may unfold, and getting really obsessed with the numbers and the digits of it. Oh, I have the 4. I have the 4. That means and this is how my life is unfolding, kind of thing. But there's a part of ourselves with our spiritual guides, with our connection to a higher power, with a connection to a shamanic reality, that might transcend a lot of that. Because when you look at linear time and how all of this is unfolding step by step by step, all the planets going around this in a counterclockwise fashion, it's all very linear. It's all very left, you could say, if you want to think about it in terms of leftness and rightness. Human design itself is a very left-oriented knowledge. We're looking at particulars, and it's very linear. But there's a part of it, like, say, if you just collapsed all that linear stuff and consider that this is all happening at once. It's all happening right now. It's not just so sequential. When you can pull your vision back from it in that way, that's a really interesting perspective and vantage point. But we're going to go into it and look into this illusion. We're going to look deeply into this Maya. But it's important to keep that in mind, that it is the Maya, so we don't take it too seriously, even though it's going to seem like I'm taking all this very seriously. It's the fun paradox. So when we look over here, we have these two things that Lady Justice, or Mayat, is balancing: the alpha and the omega symbol. Spiritual reality, the source, and physical reality, the phenomenal universe, with omega. Now, it's really fascinating that, Libra, the scales, Lady Justice, and Mayat, is balancing these two things. And the omega symbol is really the symbol of Libra. That's what the omega symbol is. It's the symbol of Libra is an omega symbol with a line underneath it, right? It's a sun rising above a horizon. It's what allows us to see. It's what allows us to see. It's the phenomenal universe. Ego identification with form very much concerns the middle world sun in shamanism, and also the sun as it's connected to leftness in human design. Note that the sun is also the root symbol of religious salvationism and redemption for obvious reasons. It is the dense, phenomenal world, the world that is physically seen and is where all the action truly takes place. But it's also connected to karma being what? Apparent cause and effect. And I say apparent cause and effect. There's a lot of illusion going on here, but that doesn't mean that there's no such thing as cause and effect, but there's some tricky stuff when we start getting into cause and effect. There is some tricky stuff in there that we're going to be looking at. So what goes around comes around, right? What goes around comes around. And this is the linear way of understanding all of this, the linear way of understanding human design. It's even a linear way that the ego identifies with its existence. What goes around comes around. It's why the ego lacks so much compassion. It's because of the identification with form. What goes around comes around. What you give is what you get. It's like, yeah, that's true in some ways. That's true in some ways, but there's also something about it when the ego identifies itself with just the form and how things look on the surface, with the phenomenal universe, with the sun, with the solar energy of what's seen and what's obvious, what's right on the surface. That has a lot of separation built into it, like how all these particles are separated. It's about weighing things. duality, contrast. Is that the truth? Well, everything about this is about truth. Truth is one of the highest principles in the universe. No religion is higher than truth. It doesn't matter what people say about things. The truth is the truth. Now, of course, there are quantum realities. A lot of things can be shifted around. I've experienced it. There can be amazing things that can take place. But there's also, when we want to look at the reality of things and how they exist in the physical phenomenal universe, that's a very important thing. But looking at the actual gates of the spleen being left all over here in Libra, it's kind of cool, right? That's why I have it blue. And we can even see this same blue within the card of Libra, justice or adjustment. It's cool, right? But there's a whole other thing that you could say the ego is afraid of when we look at rightness. And this is the main issue. This is a great quote from a story called Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. And I thought it fitting to put here. It goes, "I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may be at this very moment crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols, and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of a puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink, and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium." I love that quote. It's a fascinating thing because it's about nameless things. Nameless things. When you think of leftness, it's about labeling. It's about naming everything we see. It's what we see. You have to be able to distinguish this from that. That's everything about the phenomenal universe, and it's why the ego is so wrapped up here with its identification with form. You are you, and I am me, and this is that, and that, everything, and we're so caught up in ourselves, and it's so selfish, really. And it's like an endless amount of delusion, really. Even though it's a beautiful thing that we get to have this separate experience, we get to have our own special little preferences, that's all fine and good, but there's an obsession with it that is keeping us from another reality. You could think of this very much like what I talked about in the Circuitry and Beyond video. Lovecraft was, in a way, writing stories about the subconscious and its evolution and coming into consciousness. And there's an interesting fear that comes out of that. It's like the left is afraid of that. It's afraid of what it cannot identify. It's afraid of nameless things, right? It's also what Freud called the return of the repressed. Because what we push down, in a way, gets stuck here. And then it can come back to haunt us. And this is basically what Lovecraft is writing about, like in the story of Dagon. Like when he says he dreams of a day when the land shall sink. The land, right? Leftness. When the land shall sink, and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. This is actually happening. It's actually happening. And it's like a transformation. It's a transformative process. It's a deep transition. And different people are turning this corner in different ways of how we experience the world and getting into shared essence and getting out of the self-obsession of separateness and the nightmares of it and the suffering of it, the pain of it, the very high prices that we pay in only identifying with things on this level. Now, again, I don't want this to seem like this has its place. It absolutely does. It's how we can delineate things and know truth, the reality of things. But when we're overly obsessed with it, we can't look into a larger reality because there's too many unknowns. So what do? We generally become unconsciously afraid of it, And it starts to come out in our repressions, in our biases, in our darker dreams, in our attitudes and belief systems, things that we are again not even really that conscious, unconscious attitudes about things that seem foreign, things that seem different, things that don't seem to be like us, how we identify ourselves. So it might just seem like, yeah, things that are crawling and floundering on a slimy bed, worshiping their, ancient stone idols and detestable likenesses and all this kind of stuff. That's kind of like how we would see the outsider, the ultimate outsider, that is in a way much more powerful. We have a sense, we have a creeping suspicion that it's much more powerful than we are, but we're too afraid to go into it and surrender to it to see what's in there, which is understandable. You don't just want to open the floodgates of all of this. Which is why there's such a big healing thing going on. But how much of this healing is almost impossible to heal because of how it's being approached? It's because of the fear of other people and the fear of losing your personal identity within this. A lot has been going around with leftness being the creation of karma, but it has yet to experience a full coming back around or discharge of that karma. Solar plexus awareness concerns the understanding of great vast cycles, of understanding where humanity has truly come from. Its rising awareness represents the ending of amnesia and the deepest ancestral repressions. That's very important to understand that. When you think of leftness and creation of karma, or even the lower trigram, it kind of creates the karma that the world sees a lot of due to its need for security, its need to understand itself. But it's at a point now where it's at a breaking point. It's at a breaking point. It needs to shift. And with humanity in particular, and this process has probably happened countless times throughout the universe. But with humanity in particular, it's a pretty heavy one because of how asleep we've been, how much we've pushed down this. There have been wonderful spiritual traditions around the world who've known all about this, just using different kinds of language. But generally, we've just been over here and stuck in the obvious world and pushing all repressions down so that we can just keep this thing going and creating lots of karma while we're doing it. The great storm that we're experiencing is a massive accumulation and creation of karma, while simultaneously gaining the tools to finally be able to discharge it, spiritually, physically, emotionally, and mentally. So the left is very much connected to the world that we see. It's the sun. It's the sun rising above the horizon, the phenomenal universe. But we see how this can be manipulated. And we're so focused in that way. And there are a lot of people who want to control things who are focused on that level. It is concerned with truth. But truth can have like a kind of monopoly. When you think of swords in tarot and you think of air signs, they're the same thing. Swords, air, right? Swords and words. And this very much has like this, the sun in the background, of course, owing to its connection to Libra, the rising sun. The beginning of Libra is this 46th hexagram. It opens Libra. Now, this is really interesting. The 46th hexagram, in the ancients' name for it, was called rising or pushing upward. Kind of like the rising sun, right? Rising or pushing upward. Think about that. It is rising or pushing upward. It's revealing the world of separateness. It's a great revealing. The sun rises to reveal what is seen and known in the outer splenic world of duality. The world of the this and the that, of contrast, of me and not me, etc. But within the great historical pushing up of the 46th hexagram, being the showing of what's known that can lead to a strong sense of security, there has also been a great pushing down of other things. So we see, like, this is what the media does. It's always claiming to show you what it is, what's going on, right? With all the bad news or whatever else they might be telling you. With political things, I mean, I pretty much don't pay attention to anything the news is saying, because there's always this element of manipulation and deception and wanting to tell you what's going on, when in reality everything is going on all at once. They're only picking certain things to show you, and it's all just a big fat illusion anyway. You know? And it could be connected to steering intellectual discourse in colleges. Again, this has a lot to do with knowledge. Now, knowledge is really important. It's just that it's being manipulated. Like I said earlier, truth is one of the most, if not the most important thing in the universe. Truth, and also knowledge. It is so, so, so important. It's the most important thing. But it can also be manipulated. I would recommend people watch this documentary, Dawn of a New Day by Jordan Maxwell. It has a lot to do with the obsession with solar energy and solar symbolism in certain groups and cults throughout history. Why are they so obsessed with the sun? And why are they so obsessed with controlling things? There's a reason for that. Dawn of a New Day by Jordan Maxwell. So we also have the right with all these gates over here in Pisces. A lot of them are in Pisces. Of course, the 6 is not in Pisces. The 63 is actually in the head center. And the 6, that's in the solar plexus, that's actually over here. And we'll get into why that is. That's an interesting thing that we'll talk about later. But for the sake of symmetry and just to have it look, nice and symmetrical, I'm going to have the 63 colored in here as if it's part of the solar plexus, even though it's not. Now, with the left, like a way of understanding this is we have security and insecurity, certainty and uncertainty with the right, known and unknown, seen, unseen, destiny and fate, order, chaos or seeming chaos, things and no thing. Now, which one would you rather live in? Which one would you rather have? Which side is almost everybody wishing they had? Obviously, it's this side. This is what everybody wants. Security, certainty, for things to be known, to get rid of all unknowns, to be comfortable with what's seen, to have a sense of destiny, to have order, and to, of course, have a lot of things. Like we love having things, right? We don't like this. We don't like insecurity, uncertainty. We don't trust the unknown. We're afraid of the unseen. We don't feel like being lost to fate or seeming chaos and no thing that we can identify. But I'm telling you, if you want to have an adventure and you want to experience real freedom, this is where you want to walk into. You want to walk into this as much as you can, because there's a bigger, wider, greater universe when you walk into this that none of this can prepare you for. Not necessarily. It can push you to the precipice of stepping into the unknown, but actually stepping into the unknown, that's a whole other thing. It requires a lot of trust and a lot of faith and a lot of letting go of this. And I know it's a process. It seems like it's not something that can be done right away, just letting go of all this. And that Letters from 500 quote, that is so important in understanding here. Humans are always trying to fill in the void, no matter how you may feel it in your lives. Your minds and egos like to dwell on the surface. You rightly fear what lies below. It is not your human identity. It is alien to that persona. Below you, the void does lie nonetheless, quietly, persistently waiting for those lone moments when your superficial distractions run out. Then it rises almost to the surface, yet not quite there. The void does not truly come to the surface, not fully. The surface is a facade, an illusory form. The void is reality. You will never find it in superficiality. It beckons you always from within. Reality, authenticity, is always there within you, speaking to you in the still small voice. No matter how you try, you cannot hide from reality. I interrupt. Is that the ultimate reality then? Nothing? Everything is just nothing, total emptiness and meaninglessness. Oh, Miss Squints, have you not heard what I said? That nothingness is the fount of all your things, of all creation. As for meaning, that must come out of the emptiness, out of the vast, formless being. There is nowhere else that it can come from. The void is hardly devoid of meaning. It is the formless, raw material out of which meaning grows. Meaning cannot derive from itself, that is, not from the form it takes on in your world. This cannot be a first cause. That would be truly meaningless. As an example, red cannot derive from red. To say so would be without informational value. Red must have a source that is not its own form. Red derives from the prismatic splitting of pure white light. It comes from the incarnate visual perception. In the same way, meaning comes from the prismatic splitting of the emptiness, projected into the sensibilities of creatures such as you and me. Source, though never separate, must always be perceived as other than that which is derived from it. Otherwise, derivation itself is meaningless. This is the point I would make. Everything must derive from no thing by some path. Meaning must derive from a state that precedes meaning. Thus the void is by no means meaningless. But humanity, obsessed with wanting more of everything, of feeling acute scarcity all around it, does denigrate the nothingness of the void and tries to relegate it to the inconsequential. Your species wants to make it irrelevant. Your fear dictates your psychology. That fear, however, actually conceals an innate knowing within you. If the void were truly irrelevant, there would be no need to fear it. By your fear, you acknowledge the power lying at its core. By attempting to fill the void within you, you turn to all manner of delusions, distractions, and addictions. You turn your backs on the now, filling it up with form-bound and time-bound reactions. You identify with these things in a vain attempt to displace power from its true foundation and put it into the ego and mind. This cannot work, as you well know. The surface has no power except as derived from below. Thus does your ego fear real power and mask it over with its own version of power, control. All your fears are, in fact, reactions against the depths within your own being. They take form at the interface with the void. For many, this is the threshold of fear. We advise that you accept the void as your ultimate reality. You would thus address your fears face on. There could be no greater reality show. For the evolution of your species to proceed, you must pass through that threshold of fear, doubt, and abandonment in order to find peace. But be assured, the void is the source of the only peace and power that there truly is. I love that quote. And it sort of tells me why I love Lovecraft so much. Like stories like that, it's all about going into the unknown. It's uncertain. Things are unseen. It's a really interesting thing. I just like the atmosphere of it, of letting go into that. And sometimes in the stories, the protagonist discovers a reality that isn't so bad, that isn't as dark as he thought it was. It turns out to be maybe just another dimension that he was having a human reaction toward. Now we have the creation of karma and the discharge of karma. The creation of karma and the discharge of karma. When you think of the creation of karma, yeah, it's like the billiard balls, right? When you set up the pool table and you hit the balls, it's like this smacks into that, and then that, and then this, and then that. There's an element of reality to it, of being able to see things and label them. But when we do that, we get caught up into a pretty thick mental web of cause and effect, and we start to feel threatened by our own security because of this, because we're going to get banged in by things. Now, there is an element of reality to this. Of course, we want to be able to take care of ourselves. Of course, if you have a child in a car, you want to have them in a car seat. Of course, you want to take certain precautions, in the splenic reality, you want to be able to take care of yourself because shit can happen. It really can. It's an element of existence that I don't want to tell you is like doesn't exist, okay? Because both of these things go together. It's just that when you identify exclusively on this side, that's where you're going to get some hardcore ego complexes if you're not integrating this other stuff that has to do with shared essence, and that is not about you as an individual. Again, the solar plexus does not have a direct connection to the G center. It's not about you and necessarily your direction. That's what the spleen is about. It's about just, self-preservation, taking care of yourself. It does have a direct connection to the G center. With the level of tone is set up in this triangle. We have the left and the right. 1, 2, and 3, the first, second, and third tones pull everything to the left. And then we have the 4th, 5th, and 6th tones, which pull everything to the right. Now, the tone is 2 steps below the line. You have the line of the hexagram, right? All these hexagrams. But within each line of a hexagram, you have 6 colors. And within each color, you have 6 tones. And within each tone, you also have 5 bases, but base is something we'll look at somewhere else. But when you look at tone is interesting because it fixes your cognition. It fixes things into either a left or right. And it's has a lot of the same kinds of meanings as color and line. You could think of the first, second, and third lines of the hexagram, the lower trigrams, like all these lower trigrams, that set the tone for things. You could think of them as being more left, generally. More left. And this is, of course, also connected to the G center, which we're going to be looking at later. The first and second tones are called concentrated. Concentrated. Third and fourth tones are periodic. The 5th and 6th tones are cyclical. Now, isn't that interesting? There's an element, there's a lot of sexual connotations with all of this, even human beings sexually. Masculine sexuality is concentrated, with his reproductive fluids, it's just concentrated. There are millions of sperm cells, millions of them. It's highly concentrated. And it's not like a cyclical thing. You don't just get rid of it. Some of it does leave the body. If you're practicing celibacy for very long periods of time, it does have a way of cycling, but it's always there. There's always millions of them, and it's very concentrated, even in its expression. A lot of guys complain about it, that they don't like being overly sexed. It's actually kind of annoying. It's not fun. But that's where, discipline and trying to understand yourself better and putting that kind of energy into certain other tasks or trying to focus it in other ways. So you're not necessarily being seduced by certain other things. Like, there's an interesting thing about the cyclical nature. That's entirely feminine. It's entirely the moon. The moon moves in cycles. The feminine reproductive system runs in cycles. And is very mysterious, actually. It's just 1 egg per month. Of course, there can be 2 eggs. There can be, if a woman is taking fertilization shots and things like that, she can have like quintuplets and all of that kind of thing. But generally, it's just 1 egg a month. One. Then it leaves and then it's recycled. There's another one that comes in. The cyclical nature of things. Very different from concentrated, but they go together. The 3 and the 4 is the periodic This is the boundary zone of being able to see both the left and the right, being able to see. There is no direct connection between just the left and the right, meaning like there's no channel leading from the spleen to the solar plexus. There's these bridges, and you can think of these bridges as like this dividing line between the 3 and the 4, or individual circuitry. It's also what individual circuitry is about. It's why it's so mutative, and why it's why it has to do with new energy, new life. It's also why it's connected to knowledge. When the left and the right intermingle here, a lot of powerful, powerful stuff comes out of it that we need to pay attention to in the coming years. You can think of the left as this obelisk. Obelisks. Obelisks are symbols of masculine creative potential, of singularity, in a way, of a kind of source energy. It's a thing. The feminine side is the Vesica Pisces, or the Vesica Pisces. It's the no thing. In terms of the yin and yang, with the numbers of the lines of the hexagram, and even the colors and tones, it goes yang for the 1, yin for the 2, yang for the 3, yin for the 4, yang for the 5, and yin for the 6. So from 1 to 6, it's yang, yin, yang, yin, yang, yin. Now this is fascinating, because you could say that the left is predominantly yang, right? It's predominantly yang, even though it has a yin expression within it. We're going to get into why this is. The right is predominantly yin, even though it does have a yang expression within it. Now, have you noticed, in understanding and learning about the lines of the hexagram, for example, that the 2 and the 5 have a sexual thing about them? They're seductive. There's something about them that is seductive, that pulls you in. You want to know what's going on with it. You might project onto it. It has a way of moving, like, you know, that Outcast song, I like the way you move. Same thing with the 5. The 2 and the 5 have a lot of things in common, really. Why is that? There is a yang within a yin environment, and there is a yin within a yang environment with the symbol. It's the same thing with the 2 and the 5. The 2 is a yin within a yang environment. That's what makes it more sexual. That's what makes it seductive. That's what makes it interesting. Everything about the 2 has to do with space. Everything about the 2 is about space, but it's in a yang environment. The 5 is different. It's yang, but it's in a yin environment. So how is that? That's what leads the 5 to like being so seductive, delivering things, needing to be there for people in just the right kind of way, in a masculine way that is specific, but also very transpersonal at the same time. So you can see how the 2 and the 5 are very seductive and sexy, right? People want them to be things. They want to look up to them and want them to, you know, either fulfill something for them, that a missing piece they've been looking for. That's like the eye of the yin and the yang. It's the masculine and the feminine wanting to look and find itself within the other. And it generates a lot of sexual tension, a lot of sexual energy within them, which is, it's a very good thing. It's a very good thing. And the sacral radiating energy, where the masculine is within the feminine is within the masculine, right? Now the 2 and the 5, they have a lot in common, because they are the second, when you look at the line of the hexagram, they're the second line of their respective trigram. When you look at the 1 and the 4, They are the foundation of their respective trigram, right? The 1 and the 4, the 3 and the 6 are at the top of their respective trigram. So the relationship between the left and the right, or the lower trigram and upper trigram, is 1, 4, 2, 5, and 3, 6, right? But the 2, 5 is a fascinating one here, again, like because of what I was talking about. And we're going to move really deeply into this balance between masculine and feminine because it's so important. There's a lot of passion that's generated with this friction. There's a lot of projection as well. Now, isn't this like the main thing that goes wrong with relationships? There's way too much projection taking place because of all the tension, all the sexual tension, all the expectation, all the wanting what you want, how you want it, when you want it, because you have preferences too, and all that. You want to be filled by the other. You want to be fulfilled by the other. But what happens? If you have passion without compassion, it is doomed. Passion without compassion is doomed. It's dead in the water. It will be eventually. You can have all the passion in the universe, but if there is not compassion, it is not going to work. And compassion is both the left and the right. I don't want it to sound like compassion is only a right-oriented thing, because some people might assume that. Compassion is very much connected to the left as well. Because again, you have to have both. Sort of like with Anthony William and his source, with how he gets his information. It's all very left kind of information, right? It's all about things and what things are good for what things. It's about knowledge and truth. It is so important, knowledge and truth. Knowledge and truth. Of course, shamanism, quantum healing, all that stuff, that's amazing too. That does a lot of amazing things. Both of these work together, and we do not want to get caught up in who's right, who's wrong with everything, you know. It's so important to understand that both of these things work together to generate our reality. They generate creation, generators, right? It generates our reality, both the left and the right coming together, because they are ecstatically in love with each other. No matter where you look in nature, whether it's how stars and planets are formed, whether it's, you know, you're looking at plants and animals, there is a kind of ecstasy in how it needs to unfold itself in order to perpetuate its experience, its existence, to keep moving forward with everything. Now, some people might know of this interesting connection to the Holy Communion. The Holy Communion. There are a few people who understand the sexual connotations within Catholic symbolism. It's actually very ancient, and it's very powerful. When you take Holy Communion in Catholic Mass, you are given a wafer, a cracker with a cross on it, that's made out of wheat. It has to do with the sun, things in particular, the cross, north, south, east, and west. Who is in the center of north, south, east, and west? Always you are. That's what north, south, east, and west is about. It's about you being nailed upon the cross of the phenomenal universe, right? You were born on this planet at a particular time in a particular way. That's why, you know, looking at your human design is very left. It's very left knowledge, right? It's very linear. You have a birth time, a birth date, a specific everything. You're so specific, very unique. This is an element of reality that is important. But there's another element as well with the communion, the cup of communion, the grail, the Holy Grail, that catches the blood of Christ. That's what it's supposed to symbolize, the blood of Christ, right? So we have the body of Christ and the blood of Christ, the masculine and feminine. This is really important to be aware of in how all of this works. The body of Christ it can seem like martyred, you know, and that's kind of why the third line is called the martyr, because it feels like it has to balance all this stuff. It's nailed upon the cross of reality. We have the finite, which is what the horizontal cross is about. finite, the horizontal arm of the cross. It has limitations. But we also have the infinite, which is what the vertical is about. Now, this is why the vertical is so important. The vertical is what people get in touch with in shamanic practice, actually. If you're only lost in the horizontal world, boy, are you going to be suffering, because you're going to feel like you're being pushed around by these billiard balls, right? The horizontal world can push you around quite a bit. And you can feel lost in the horizontal. And trying to identify with the horizontal, meaning basically wanting to identify with the culture you found yourself in order that you feel like you belong, in order to get rid of any kinds of sense of uncertainty and all that. We just want to identify with the culture we're in so that we can feel secure. But getting more in touch with the infinite, that's an important thing. Getting more in touch with the vertical path, getting to the top of the mountain, climbing to the top of the mountain, no matter how painful it is, having a kind of spiritual discipline or a kind of connection to truth that can pull you through anything, because there is always this intersection between the finite and the infinite in this world. It is the Alpha and Omega, right? The Alpha and the Omega, the infinite and the finite, working together, bringing this fascinating projection into reality with all these different possibilities. But you can also feel quite crucified upon it. You can feel quite martyred because you can feel like you're out of control of a lot of things. But if you can maintain your vertical connection to knowledge and truth, you are basically unable to be controlled. You are unable to be manipulated or taken advantage of, which is really important. The Alpha and Omega, again. So we have the left, right? Phenomenal universe, the body of Christ. And we also have the 46 hexagram, rising or pushing upward. So many sexual innuendos in human design, the further we dig into it. Rising or pushing upward. Then we have the right, which is the no thing in particular, the blood of Christ, the blood of the moon, cycles, cyclical nature, no thing, upper trigram, upper colors, right fixing tones, peripheral, not so focused. And there's a lot of fascinating things going on with this. There's fascinating things going on with both of these and how they work together and how they should be balanced in the world. But when looking at the solar plexus gates, there's an interesting thing that pops out. We have the 36 hexagram at the end of Pisces. It's the last full hexagram of Pisces. Okay. Now this is interesting. It's actually called the darkening of the light. The darkening of the light. It's sort of like the opposite of the 46. The 46 is all about this sun rising or pushing upward, pushing into a new reality, right? It's at the beginning of the splenic gates, but at the end of the solar plexus gates, we have this 36, the darkening of the light. It's also connected to the dark night of the soul, which is what Pisces has a lot to do with, especially the last full hexagram of Pisces. You know the saying, it's always darkest before the dawn. It's always darkest before the dawn. Right before the dawn, right when it seems like it cannot get any darker, there's a shift. There's a shift. We have Christ and the story of Christ and his suffering, right? Him sacrificing his body and being stabbed with the spear. Now, this is a very fascinating story that shouldn't be taken so literally, okay? It's telling us something. And there's actually a lot of sexual information within this about creation and how reality generates itself. God sent his only son to die. So Christ energy split off from source in order to come into this reality, to be what? Brutalized by the horizontal and misunderstood and then crucified. Kind of sounds like the third line experience all on its own. The third line is at the very top of the lower trigram, meaning it's an embodiment of all of this left stuff that is getting so close to transmuting and getting into a transpersonal reality, but not quite. So it just feels like it has to balance so much. It has to have so much trial and error. That's why it feels like a martyr. That's why it feels so crucified upon certain things. But a lot of amazing discovery can come out of that if it can just keep pushing forward, if it can just stay with it. Yeah, forgive them, my fathers, for they know not what they do. When you look at the horizontal world, you're going to see a lot of conformity. You're going to see a lot of ignorance. You're going to see a lot of reactions to things, a lot of cultural things, a lot of just kind of autonomous things going on. But whenever there's a vertical message coming through, they try to crucify it. They want to stamp it out because it's shaking up their sense of security, right? The alpha is shaking up the security, the fake security that's in the omega. But there needs to be balance between the two, the finite and the infinite. So what goes around eventually comes around. The intention you put out and moving into life and then willingly going into like a transpersonal world where there is a darkening of the light and you sacrifice yourself for the good of humanity kind of thing. Sacrifice your sense of self. It doesn't mean you literally go out and nail yourself on a cross. It means you have to give up a part of yourself, so to speak, so that humanity can be forgiven for its sins, right? It's compassion, like the passion of the Christ, the compassion of the Christ. Very important. There needs to be this element between the left and the right, because without it, all we're going to get is a lot of division and discord and, being split in our own thinking, one side wanting to blame the other side in just a kind of contrarian way because it's easy. It's easy just to look at the other, whether it's the other people, the other gender, the other political party, the other race of people, the other football team. It's easy just to blame them. If there's no compassion and understanding of what's going on between the sides and how they actually, both of them generate reality when they're working together harmoniously. Even if they're not working together harmoniously, they're still generating reality. It's just more of an unconscious reality, which is what we're getting out of more and more. And it's going to be quite a shock the more we move out of this unconscious reality and the illusion of our separateness. The more we move out of the illusion of separateness, it will be quite a shocking thing to understand the deep unity between everything. Now, pay attention again to the 6 hexagram. Remember? 6 is actually the opposite of 36, darkening of the light. Its programming partner, the opposite of it, is actually the 6 over here, which is right before the 46. Right before the dawn, right before the rising and pushing upward. That's interesting. The 6 is the boundary buster in the solar plexus, right? It's at the very tip of the solar plexus. Meaning it's kind of like a concentrated aspect of everything solar plexus. Same thing with the 50. The 50 is like a concentrated aspect of everything in the spleen. But the 6 being connected to baby making with the 59-6 channel right? That's interesting. That it's about carrying things to term. Now, you can look at this literally. You could do that. You could be like, well, yeah, the 659 channel, that's about like, if you have that, you want to make babies and all that. I've known people with this channel who are fascinated with pregnant women. Like they're like a doula in terms of pregnancies. They love pregnant women. They love the babies developing, the whole thing about it. But they also love helping people carry projects and ideas to term. It's not just about babies. It's about helping people conceive, period. It could be about birthing and conceiving new ideas, carrying them to term, helping people get to a certain point before they can just go and walk on their own. That's left. Helping them get to a left place. Because once it's born, it's in the world and it's on its own. It needs to be able to take care of itself. It needs to be able to feed itself. It needs to be able to walk on its own, think on its own, talk on its own. But until then, until that point, it needs to be nurtured and taken care of. And both of these go together. Say when this part is all grown up and taking care of itself, it can take care of other things, and everything is taking care of everything else. Everything is taking care of everything else, always. It's not so linear because there's only right now. It's all happening all at once. There is no who started it. Who was the first one to initiate sexual contact between the, at the beginning of human evolution? Who was the one that was made first? But with the 659, there's a fascinating thing in terms of incarnation. Incarnation. Incarnate, carne means flesh. Incarnation means, if you look up the dictionary definition of it, incarnation means divinity in flesh. Divinity in flesh. That's what that is. It's these sides working together. It's actually, incarnation is a word that was originally used to describe Christ. Divinity is here in the flesh. Divinity in flesh. Incarnate. I mean, that's what everybody is. And it's funny because this is what Christ tried to tell people. Everything I can do, you can do and more. Everything I am, you are. There is no difference. I and my Father are one. That kind of thing. All of this stuff. It's basically you being able to identify with source so that you're not getting lost in a horizontal world of illusion, of the finite. Okay? The finite is illusion. Finite is form. Things come into existence, things pass out of existence. And if you identify with that, boy, are you going to be suffering. You're going to be carrying this cross and carrying other people's suffering. And if you do that resentfully, I mean, there's a lot of fascinating ways of understanding how this works. If you actually have compassion, carrying this weight can be a joy. Think about Anthony William, how much weight he carries for other people, how much he puts himself through. I mean, I think he's a really good example of how much work he dedicates to helping people. How much time, how much effort, how much it's like torture. He's carrying quite a cross, but that's not just to make him a martyr. Anybody is like this who joyfully is of service, being of service to other people. It's the greatest, highest pursuit in the universe, to be of service, to be of pure service, to not intervene with others. You can help them, but you're not intervening in the way of like, how can I put this? Because I've been reading a lot of the Allies of Humanity material, which is actually perfectly in alignment with human design and all of this information. And I want to do a video about that at some point. If you go to alliesofhumanity.org, these messages that Marshall Summers has been receiving, warning people against any kind of intervention, and that there's going to be a lot of slick and sly and persuasive words spoken that are speaking to a part of ourselves that isn't being very critical, that isn't being very connected to our own knowledge and truth, right? It's trying to supplant all that in order that we can have everything we want right now, kind of like a petulant child. That's what all the law of attraction stuff is doing, basically. That human existence should only be about two things: pleasure, just pleasure, that's it, and getting what you want in the moment. Nothing else. But when you get into real spirituality, that's what this is about. That's real spirituality right here. Being able to be of service in a powerful way and also being connected to knowledge, real knowledge. And what do we see with people like Bashar or Abraham Hicks and certain other channelers and things like that? When people ask them pinpointed questions about how can I heal my disease, what's going on with this, what's going on with that, they give them really shallow answers that are only trying to persuade them in a certain way, right? You just got to follow your excitement, right? It's all just about pleasure, 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 pleasure. You just got to, dive into your pleasure principle or your own needs on that level of just wanting to get rid of the pain. But even, there are things you can do, actual things, but they don't tell anybody any of that. I've never heard any talk by Abraham Hicks, and I've listened to a lot of them, and I've listened to a lot of Bashar discussions. I've never heard them in any one of them talk about toxins, poisons, that they could perhaps change their diet, that they could perhaps cut out processed foods, taking certain supplements, things like that are actually healing millions of people. Okay, Abraham Hicks stuff cannot boast those same kinds of results. They can't, but they will forever deny it. They will forever deny it. They just do not bring up things because it's not their place. They don't want people to have real knowledge, not real knowledge. So, incarnation, having compassion, real compassion, and also knowledge. Knowledge is very much connected to the central column. Knowledge, very, very much connected to the central column. Creation of karma, that's something that we need to get a handle on, and the only way we can get a handle on that is surrendering the separate self to a communal self. It doesn't mean you don't have vitality as an individual. It just means that the body of Christ and the blood of Christ are working together now. Right? It isn't just man against woman, woman against man, and patriarchies and blah, 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 and all that nonsense and all this. Whose fault is it? Who started it? Who needs to be punished? Who's the exalted one? Who needs to bow before whom? You need to bow before me. Well, no, you need to bow before me. All that bullshit. All that bullshit. I don't like looking at any of it. I don't care what it is, MGTOW or women's movements or men going their own way. And yes, it's important for men to be in touch with their masculinity and understand what it is. And it's important for women to be in touch with their femininity and understanding what it is. But if we don't understand how they work together, and we're so self-obsessive, that we're only concerned with what we want in terms of pleasure, in terms of just, what I want, like a child, just like a petulant child. Gimme, 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 gimme. Just treating the whole universe like this. Gimme. I want what I want when I want it. I want it. Gimme. This is going to run us into some serious trouble eventually if there can't be compassionate unity between the two, right? Sacrificing, because both women and men have this splenic reality. It doesn't matter. So this is how tone is set up. We have left tones and right tones. We have the 1 and the 2, which is concentrated, 3 and the 4, which is periodic, and the 5 and the 6, which is cyclical. Now, there's an interesting thing with the Ajna binary. This is called the splenic binary, the 1 and the 2. The 5 and the 6 is called the solar plexus binary. But the 3 and the 4 is actually called the Ajna binary, the Ajna binary. It's a way of seeing. The 3 is called outer vision, and the 4 is called inner vision. Now, this is really important. So, in just looking at the Ajna binary and how it works, the 3rd tone of inner vision is very much connected to utility. When you see things, you want things to, it doesn't matter where you're looking at, things have to have some kind of purpose. Purpose. This is a masculine thing. It's such an important thing for a man to have a sense of purpose and to be recognized for having that purpose within him. Because if that purpose is taken away, it can crush him and it can kill him. That's why suicide rates among males are so much higher than women. Suicide rates among males are so high because their sense of purpose can feel compromised, very much so. I'm not saying women don't kill themselves, but even like, say, when Anthony would talk about when men are given terminal diagnoses, they always, not always, but much, much, much more than women kill themselves because the news is so crushing, they feel like they lost purpose. They have no more utility. They can't even project into the future anymore. Why? They don't even have a future. They've just been given 2 years to live. And they believe it, and it crushes them on such a deep level that they will unzip their own immune system and die. This is what happened with AIDS. I mean, yes, those men were sick. The initial symptoms are real, but what Anthony is saying is they were just sick with, a lot of the viruses and things that's being shared between people. HHV6s, HHV7s, lots of herpetic viruses like that. Lots of Epstein-Barr viruses in the liver. And if you're overloaded with that stuff and you're not taking care of yourself and you're doing drugs and things like that, yeah, you're going to have a set of symptoms, which are true. But what happens is you go to a doctor and they say, oh, you have AIDS and you have 1 year to live. You tell a man that, you've just taken his life. It's practically murder. You just murdered this person by telling them that. You took away his purpose. You took away his life. You took away his meaning. That is not good. With women, it's a different thing because they are automatically and inherently connected to a different reality, a different kind of thing that is more open to possibilities, right? If they're given a death sentence, there's already something within them that's saying, yeah, maybe. When you think about the left and concentration, boy, is it taking things literally. Boy, is it taking things heavily. And it's not always easy. I mean, women like that about men generally. The concentrated nature of everything, the intense focus on one thing at a time, the sense of purpose, the sense of utility, all of that. And how deeply they can pierce into things, even sexually. It all has the sexual connotations, but it's mirrored within our own ajna experiences as well. The masculine side is more piercing, looking into. And if you take away the purpose of somebody like this, boy, are they going to feel worthless in the extreme. But a lot of women when they're given diagnoses like that, you have 1 year to live, you have 2 years to live. There's a will within them that can overcome that stuff. Like, yeah, you've given me this diagnosis, but there's something within me that needs to pull through because it's like there's something else going on with her own sacral, with her own connection to solar plexus reality, with her connection to this communal reality, needing to live for something or somebody else. Of course, masculine can do that too, because again, it all works together. There is masculine within feminine, there is feminine within masculine. It's just that one side is generally more concentrated than the other, right? One side is generally more literal than the other. It's just how it is. With men, with labels, and with looking at things, and with science, I'm not saying there's no such thing as female scientists or authors or philosophers or anything like that. It's just that it's a predominantly male thing. It's just how it is. And women can be resentful about that. But you know what? There is a kind of unconscious resentment that men can have for women because of their abilities too, of being able to carry life, give life, of having a will within them that is almost superhuman, that can overcome things like what? A death sentence given to you by a doctor, certain things like that. Being able to bounce back from things really quick as if it didn't even happen. I'm not saying all women have this, but it is a general thing I've noticed. I've heard Anthony talk about it. It is a thing. And it's a very powerful thing women have. Men and women are generally kind of different. And it's good if they can understand each other better rather than being endlessly resentful about things. You know, everybody has their hardships. Everybody has their difficulties, both men and women. You know, and this is what this is about. We want to be able to look at what these difficulties are so that we can better understand each other and where we're coming from and how we're dealing with things. So when we have outer vision, with the third tone, outer vision, things in particular, looking outside of yourself, the world of separation, what happens when you do that? You look at things and things basically seem to have a purpose. Whether you look at a tree, you know, it's what little boys are like when they look at anything. Why is the sky blue? Why is this bug like that? Of course, little girls can have that kind of inquisitive mind as well. Why? Why? Why is that like this? Why is it like that? Why is it why? Right? But generally, it's the masculine side that's really wanting to dig into why. Really, really wanting to dig into why and get down to particulars, right? Particulars. It wants to understand the cause and effect nature, even though there's kind of a riddle built into it. It's kind of an illusion, even though they're hell-bent on labeling everything. And that's why science and research right now is in a deep state of total deception, self-deception, thinking it has everything figured out when it absolutely does not, because it's so arrogant and narcissistic again. Outer vision, utility, and connected to material resources. Material resources. The right is about emotion and human resources. It's more communal, transpersonal, right? Personal and transpersonal. It's very fascinating. With the right and human resources, this is generally why, you know, the feminine side, people can relate to it very much. They don't feel put off by it so much. There's a lot of transpersonal energy here and a lot of connection taking place with how everything is connected to everything else. Not just looking at one thing at a time, but the shared essence between people and things. And they go together. They go together, isn't just one or the other. The thing that connects them is this heart, is the central column, is deep knowledge and connection and understanding. It's a very, very powerful thing. When you look at the defense circuit, which is a sub-circuit of tribal circuitry, that's what this is. We have the generation of life, like I was talking about, right? The generation of it and the conception, carrying things to term with the 59-6 channel. But you also have the 50-27 channel, which is taking care of something once it's in the world and taking care of it in a cultural sense, right? Understanding the reality of things in a cultural sense. Education, understanding truth, not being duplicitous with your word, not just saying a bunch of things all at once, sticking at one thing at a time, being very decisive about what you're looking at. This is what women generally find attractive about men, their decisiveness, right? Even the fact that they like some things and not other things in the moment. Oh, I like this. Oh, I like that, right? Just being really having a kind of a storage bin of all your likes and dislikes. I know women have that too, absolutely. Women can have all their likes and dislikes as well. But the masculine decisiveness and just picking something and sticking with something and going in a particular direction, that's all left. And it's splenic, and it's also G-center as well. Going a direction, setting a foundation, laying a foundation. being more individual, having a purpose, having a mission. I've heard women say, some women say, they can't even be with a man if he's not on a mission, if he doesn't have some kind of mission in life, some kind of purpose, if he's just floating around and, I just like playing video games and, whatever. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with video games, but I'm saying there needs to be just more than just that, than just like reveling in your pleasure principle senses and, But the same goes the other way around. With outer vision and inner vision, it's an interesting thing, and even sexually. The whole thing, men, they're very visually stimulated by things. And some of them, again, can be kind of bothered by it with how distracting it can be. They're very visually stimulated. But with the female, there's this inner vision that is so important. It's about like a story. Now, why are romance novels so like selling like crazy, like 50 Shades of Grey and all this other stuff? It's not a man's thing. Just reading a story like that and really get into a tale of meeting the woman of his dreams and all of that. When you think of rightness, it is about a story. It's about a process. It's about an abstract story process of how things are connected. But again, you read something like 50 Shades of Grey, it is kind of it is kind of like an infantile portrayal of the masculine. He's a billionaire, and he's like he's a billionaire sex addict who, can like cause you to have an orgasm just by touching you with his one finger and all of this kind of thing. I mean, I'm not saying that's impossible to do, but there's all this resentment between the masculine and feminine, generally because of how unconscious both of them are with this situation. There are these other tribal channels that are really powerful that we'll get into. Like the left tribal channels, like this entrepreneurial channel, it's more separated. The 44-26 channel between the spleen and the heart. Of course, the 50-27 and the 32-54. They're tribal, but there's more of a separated quality about them. You can be with these people in a tribal sense, but you're not going home with them. That's what this is about. You're not in with them super deep. You're not in with them super deep. Again, more sexual connotations with the feminine. It is very sticky over here, like how close things are. Being within, inner world, inside, there's shared essence over here. The 44-26 channel, it's about teamwork. You're working with people. You understand what people need in a wider context, and you can sell them things. You can, be behind something that you believe in and all that kind of thing. But you're not going home with those people and sleeping with them at night and sharing the kitchen and giving them kisses and loves, and it's not like that. That's what it's like over here. Okay? That's what that's like over here. We'll get into that later. So we have this left and right, masculine and feminine passion that needs to be infused with compassion, because if you have passion without compassion, you are in for some serious trouble and pain and heartache. We see this reflected with color and how the lower colors concern the what and the upper colors concern the how. The what and the how. Even on the level of line, we have personal, lower trigram, and transpersonal, upper trigram. But each person has this within them, right? It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Each person has these things within them as well. And the more we understand it within ourselves, We could better understand how it's working generally with everybody. Because remember, it's not just about your definition. Like I talked about in the very beginning, it's not just about your definition. Oh, I have this. My son's in the 61 and I got the 61 whatever channel and this and that. And I'm just going to like regiment my whole life around this whole thing. No, I mean, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I like looking at that. I like giving people human design readings, and it's really accurate and fun and all that. But what's really important is understanding the nature of all of it, the nature of it. How it doesn't matter if, it doesn't necessarily matter if you're a man or a woman or if you have this definition or that definition. If you can understand how masculine and feminine is operating within this structure, we can heal a whole lot. We can bridge a whole lot. There can be a lot of understanding coming out of this. Can lay down our arms, our swords, our hatchets, you know? So it's interesting, like Ra would say the heart center is actually really connected to the stomach in human design, which is interesting. And I talked a little bit about that in the throat center video, stomach and samek, the Hebrew letter samek. But I went ahead and moved the heart up here, so it's within the heart of this person. And there's left and right within each person. We have left and right brain, but we also have left and right beingness. Left and right beingness within us. There's a left part of our being that is more connected to our immune system, because your immune system and things like your liver is doing what? It's separating things. Now think about this. This is what the liver actually does. And the liver is connected to the G center, right? The liver is connected to the G center. The G center does what? It separates things. It's a splenic thing. It's about the this and the that. So when you read Liver Rescue by Anthony William, and he's talking about the liver and what it does, what does it do? It's all about your immune system. It's all about separating things. Oh my God, what is this? We got to get that out of here. Oh my God, what the hell is this petrochemical? Let's get that over here. Try to disarm it, disable it, put it in a safe place so it doesn't kill your ass. You know, it's really important. This is about the utility and the purpose of the left. It's so important to have this. You know, if we didn't have a left-oriented nature, we would all die. Because there's stuff going on. There's stuff everywhere. There's stuff in the atmosphere. There's stuff in the cleaning chemicals that are underneath your kitchen sink. There's stuff in all of this. And your liver is trying like hell to disarm it and disable it, to capture it, to get it out of your blood so that it can save your life, because it does not belong. You can say everything is all one all day. You can go ahead and say that. Yeah, we're all one. It's all one. But you know what your liver is saying? No, it's not. I am not one with heavy metals. I am not one with this Epstein-Barr virus. It needs to be detained. It needs to be contained. It needs to be disarmed. It needs to be eradicated. It needs to be gotten rid of. This is the left part of ourselves. That's why the spleen is very much connected to the immune system. And of course, the liver with the G center. Of course, there's another reality. And compassion is what exists in between them. You know, it isn't like, oh, this over here is just that and this over here is just that. Compassion is the balance between left and right. Compassion is the balance between them. We have this balance between the lower and the upper colors and the lower and the upper trigram, right? Now, say somebody has an upper color with their determination, with their design Sun Earth, 6 color. They can learn a lot from lower color stuff. They actually can. It's possible for it to all work together. It's just that lower colors need to set a good example. They need to lay a good foundation. Otherwise, upper color people may be in big trouble, because it's not their job to have to like go in here and understand all of this stuff. Not necessarily. They would rather be freed up for other things. Just very experiential things, enjoying the environment, enjoying the how of everything, not having to concern themselves with the what and giving themselves headaches over that all the time. Just getting more into the how, right? And really being into the environment with upper colors. Oh, it's so cool to see how it's all taking place. And not having to be so focused on the what. There's a magical thing in all of that. People with fifth colors have very powerful ability. People with six colors have very wonderful elements about their cognition. Their cognition is so, I mean, I've been around it. I love people with a six color determination, with a six color, with their designs on earth. It's a fascinating thing to witness, just how much they can pour their attention into so many different things and move in between things, right? Because it's about no thing in particular. Boy, they can go in any which direction. And it's cool because their interest is genuine. It's genuine interest. They're not pretending they're interested in it. They are really interested in what's possible. Upper colors have a magical, amazing thing about them. So do lower colors. Lower colors have a magical, amazing thing about them in terms of appreciation, setting the foundation for things, really appreciating things in particular. What's possible with what we have in terms of the elements of existence, right? Things. The food itself. And we get to be an example for upper colors. But what we see in the world is a lot of lower color people setting really bad examples. Really, really bad examples. And there are a lot of upper color people are paying the price for it. You know, just running around and eating everything and picking up stuff that they might regret later. But if the lower color people were doing right, then they wouldn't have to worry. They could go out and do anything and not even have to think about it. What? You're telling me I have to worry about things that are in my food? I have to worry about all this? Upper color people don't want to have to do that. But they're forced to, because there's a lower color reality that is not giving a shit about what's in the food, what it's doing, what it's mixing together, like with the third tone, with all of its science. The third color. The third color is generally more scientific, sort of like the third tone, outer vision, labeling things. Look, we have this and that. What happens when we mix this with that? Oh, we get that. Isn't that amazing? Doesn't that make me a genius? Hey, maybe we should put this in the food supply. Oh, yeah, that'll really help. Let's do that. Oh, it doesn't matter if it hurts a lot of people. It doesn't matter. I'm so intellectually narcissistic, I think it's a good thing. So let's go ahead and do that. No, it's not good. It's very, very bad. It's very, very bad. The arrogance that's over here, it drives me insane. So the left and the right, the solar plexus and the spleen. The spleen is left and the solar plexus is right, even though when you look at the wheel here, we have these solar plexus gates over here on the left and we have the splenic gates over here on the right, right? We have the 36, okay? The darkening of the light. That's the name of the 36, darkening of the light. And we also have the 46 on the other side, which is rising or pushing upward. Very fascinating, this. Darkening of the light, rising or pushing upward. We have the body of Christ, and we have the blood of Christ. This is a quote from Revisioning Psychology by James Hillman. Far more important than oversimplified and blatant self-recognitions by means of myths is the experiencing of their working intraphysically within our fantasies and then through them into our ideas, systems of ideas, feeling values, moralities, and basic styles of consciousness. There they are least apparent, for they characterize the notion of consciousness itself, according to archetypal perspectives. It is virtually impossible to see the instrument by which we are seeing. Understand that? Alan Watts would talk about this as well. Like, you can't look into your own eye without a mirror. You can't touch the tip of this finger with the tip of that same finger. Same thing with our consciousness. It's virtually impossible to see the instrument by which we are seeing. Yet our notion of consciousness may derive from the light and form of Apollo, the will and intention of Hercules, the ordering unity of the Senex, the communal flow of Dionysus. When any one of these is assumed by the ego as its identity and declared to be the defining characteristic of consciousness, then the other archetypal styles tend to be called psychopathological. But this is what people do generally anyway, when you identify so much with just one or the other. When any one of these is assumed by the ego as its identity and declared to be the defining characteristic of consciousness, then all the other archetypal styles tend to be called psychopathological. There's something wrong with you, man. No, there's something wrong with you, woman. And this is kind of the danger with human design. You know, what I'm interested in is getting in here and finding the unity between everything, the union, and how everything is so cooperative and works together. There is perfect symmetry. Of course, not perfect symmetry, right? You have the 63 and the 6, right? But you know what I mean. It's beautifully symmetrical and also explains a lot about our experience and what's going on with everything on every level of human design, whether you're looking at the body graph, the hexagram, colors, tones, when you're looking at the codon wheel, how these hexagrams actually build on each other. But looking back at this quote from James Hillman, we have the light and form of Apollo, the will and intention of Hercules, and the communal flow of Dionysus. Think about that. The light and form of Apollo. When you think of the will and intention of Hercules, that's very much a heart thing. Will and intention of Hercules. And also the communal flow of Dionysus. Now, the ordering unity of the Senex, I didn't study that much because I was moving forward with everything. But it seems like it could be an individual circuitry kind of thing. Like Apollo is obviously left, sun, solar. There's a big question. Apollo was the leader of the muses. And it's all about having a good question. A good question. He's all about riddles. Apollo was about riddles and mystery. He's going to give you a really good question to think about. That's about leftness, right? He's going to throw a bunch of things at you, and he's basically saying, here, try to figure this out. Have fun. Oh, here's a good one for you. It'll be 1,000 years before you figure this out, but have fun. Okay? There is a very bright intelligence within our sun. It is alive. It is conscious. There is something going on in leftness that is very sacred. I know I'm painting the bad picture of things that are wrong with it, but there's things going on over here that are really wrong too, like with repressions and things coming out and venom and emotional Yeah, emotional stuff can be rough. The really cold left stuff can be rough too. It's all rough when things are not integrated with each other. The communal flow of Dionysus can be amazing, but there can also be what? Overindulgence. Overindulgence, wanting to escape the coldness of the world. That's what people do. That's one of the root causes of addiction. Things feel too cold, judgmental, and uncaring over here. We'll just go over here and make it ourselves by just getting drunk every day, or shooting up heroin every day, and hanging out with our friends and doing whatever it is we need to do in order to feel some kind of communal connection. Some kind of connection. But we can overindulge, and that can become a problem too. We also see it with addiction to social media, addiction to what other people think of us, social validation, stuff like that. There's a whole other set of problems when you're looking at the right with the communal flow of Dionysus. There's a fascinating connection here with Christ that I talked about earlier, but it goes even deeper. It goes even deeper. Here we have a picture of Christ, and he's in the middle of a Vesica Pisces. Jesus was called the light of the world. There's a reason he's called the light of the world. When you combine these symbols, the left and the right combined, that's precisely what this is. He's a perfect combination of masculine and feminine. That's what Jesus is. That's why he's all about compassion. Compassion, with the burning heart, passion of Christ. This is within everybody. It's not just a one person or one way of, you know what I mean? It's everybody. Everybody has this within them. And you can unite them within you, like in the art card. What Crowley called the art card, it was actually the temperance card in other decks. There's a reason he calls it art, because there's this line in the Book of the Law, unite by thine art. Unite by thine art. Uniting things through art is a really important thing. It puts you on the middle path. It creates a direct path to the vertical, the infinite. That's art. The infinite that involves itself in the physical creates a lot of fascinating art. It's like what galaxies and individual experience comes from. It's an amazing thing to have divine intelligence actually involving itself in this physical horizontal world. And guess what? Where do you come from? I can guarantee you that you did not come from this horizontal world where everything is all just mixed up. You came from it. You have a divine source. This is where you came from, the vertical. And you are involving yourself in this horizontal experience. That seems really flat and limited, but, getting into the vertical and being able to combine that infinite connection with the finite reality you find yourself in can help engender this compassion for yourself, for the fact that you're in this situation, having compassion for yourself, but also having compassion for others, because everybody has their own story of being stuck in the horizontal, their own story, their own tragedies, their own traumas, their own everything. They've had a rough ride of all of this too, just like you have. And if you could give somebody a little bit of light, a little bit of something from this vertical path, you could change their life by giving somebody a little bit of compassion. I'm not saying I'm the best at doing it. I'm trying, and I'm moving forward. Of course, you could say, don't try, just do. That's what I don't like about language sometimes, because it's just ways of speaking. That's like left. Left is language. It's all about labeling, judging. Somebody says something wrong. We get contrarian with people. Somebody says they have a problem over here. Like, oh, have you tried this? It's so easy to do that. It's so easy to just say the opposite of what somebody says. It doesn't necessarily mean it's good advice. It just means you said the opposite of what they say. It's not compassion necessarily, but compassion can come through this when you know what you're talking about. Like say you're giving somebody health advice. You want to be able to separate things. There's the this and the that. Yeah, you probably should stay away from that cheeseburger and maybe go over here to this, banana date blueberry smoothie. That's probably better for your liver than this. And yeah, I know I might say it like a jerk. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. Having compassion is really important. We can have compassion coming into this and make it much, much more effective. Otherwise, it just seems like you're being a judgmental jerk who thinks you have the only truth. Even if it is the truth, it still seems like it's arrogant. Like, yeah, it is true that you should probably stay away from this and try eating more of that. But if it comes through in a judgmental way, then you're just going to put people off. Getting more in touch with the communal flow of Dionysus while delivering that kind of truthful information, that's great. It's more jubilant. It's a lot of jubilation over here. You can combine these two. Absolutely. You can be a surgeon who has his hands all bloody while being in total joy and in communion with the person that you're actually helping. with, so to speak, like that the person that you're in the trenches with their problem. You don't just want to treat them like they're an object, like they're just a cold specimen on your operation table, so to speak. You want to get in with them for real. Have bedside manner. Bedside manner. It's interesting, bedside manner. I mean, this is very much connected to dreams as well. It's where we go when we sleep. The right. So we have Christ in the Vesica Pisces. Vesica Pisces. We also have the 4 fixed signs surrounding him, the 4 cherubim of Leo on the bottom left, Taurus, Scorpio. The symbol for Scorpio used to be an eagle and still is. And Aquarius, the man. We also have a book, which is interesting. Knowledge. Knowledge is really important. You could think of this again, Libra. Libra is where we get the word library. Library. Libra is also connected to liber, which means book. Book. It also means freedom. And I think it's Latin. Liber. It's where we get the words liberation. It's where we get the word liberal. Right? Liberty. Do you have liberty? I have liberty to move through here. I have great liberty and justice. Liberty and justice for all. Freedom. Okay, that's really important. Knowledge is really important. That's why freedom and knowledge and the importance of individual freedom and self-determination and knowledge is so important when you're looking at the Allies of Humanity material and also the new message material that Marshall Summers has been coming out with. And there's a lot of human design stuff in there as well, but it's basically helping people prepare for what's coming with the storm of influences and what's taking place with the toxicity of the world. There needs to be a great correction, a great correction. And the only way this is going to be corrected is through a kind of shock. You're going to be shocked when you're snapped into a kind of unity, but it's good to be prepared for it. It's good to be prepared for it and know that it's coming so that you can feel it out and get more in line with the balance of these things and get more in line with actual knowledge rather than being persuaded by things that just sound good, even though it's not very much connected to knowledge. I'm interested in knowledge, actual knowledge. When I look at the human world and the accomplishments that we've made, and there's a lot of knowledge there. Of course, there can be a lot of arrogance and lostness, but the knowledge that's useful and practical is what I like. When you're looking at purely spiritual things that are not focusing on the power of the individual, what are they doing? They're trying to sell you a bill of goods. Somebody comes to Abraham Hicks and says, I've been bedridden for 10 years. I have bed sores. I have chronic migraines. I have this and that. What is she going to tell them? You have the wrong beliefs. I think you just need to start feeling better about yourself and start thinking more happy thoughts. It is demented. It is cruel, and it should tell you a lot about what's really going on with that. It's pandering to a part of ourselves that is only looking for self-gratification and pleasure, period. Self-gratification, pleasure. That does not want to have to go through the work and the discipline to maintain individual sovereignty, to gain knowledge, and to have freedom for yourself. There is something about it. Bashar is the exact same way. And it's interesting that Bashar says there's going to be like mass landings taking place in around 2027. That's what he said. 2027 is the focal year that we are going to come and try to save your world from itself. We're going to save you, and we're going to save the world, and we're going to help you clean up the environment and all that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, yeah, it would be appreciated, but there's something else about it that is kind of deceptive and pernicious. You have to read Allies of Humanity in order to understand it, because that's what he's talking about. And he's saying, don't be so quick, because the power of persuasion that these beings have is very, very high. Very, very high. And they're not necessarily respecting our human world of knowledge, how we respect knowledge, how we respect individuals and individual freedom, and how these go together. Okay, it's not just about being a narcissistic individual and only looking out for yourself. It's about how knowledge is transmuted through individuals. It's the same thing with individual circuitry. What is individual circuitry? The knowing circuit. You just know. You are centered within yourself. You have God within yourself. It's the card of Horus, right? The Aeon card. You have that. Marshall, with his connection, is basically saying these other beings do not respect that. They do not respect it. They don't even understand it. It's very important to become aware of this. We see Jesus always holding up these two fingers. You always see Jesus holding up these two fingers. What is that about? It's really interesting. It's called the Quran. Quran, not Koran. Quran. It means grew horns or radiating light. It's a Hebrew word. Quran. Grew horns or radiating light. It's why Michelangelo put horns on his statue of Moses. He put horns on it because he wanted to represent the radiating light. But he didn't want to like just put a giant halo, a giant halo on Moses. That would have been really difficult to carve. So he just put like goat's horns on it. Goat's horns on him. A lot of people don't understand why he did that. This is why. His Quran. Radiating light. It's also why Jesus is holding up two fingers all the time. He's representing the fact that he is radiating light. He is the light of the world. But there's deeper meanings within this, again, that tie into sexual connotations. It's like sexual, you could even call it tantric information encoded within this. The Hebrew letter Quran is actually spelled Kof Resh Nun. Kof Resh Nun. So we have Kof, which is the letter attributed to Pisces, the moon card. Kof, which means ear or back of head. It has to do with the subconscious. It's a darker card. It's a darker letter. Subconscious being made conscious. It's also more connected to the feminine, right? Kof. It's connected to the moon, cycles. The second letter of Quran is Resh, which is the sun. It's the letter of the sun card, actually, which is also further connected to the justice card that I talked about in a couple other videos. I mentioned that connection. So Kof, Resh, then Nun. What is Nun? Nun is Scorpio. Nun is the death card. Now, this is literally a formula for orgasm. There is a saying in French, la petite mort, the little death. That's their name for an orgasm. The little death, la petite mort. Mort. What is mort? Like we get the word mortal, Mortal Kombat, your mortgage, death debt, mortgage, death debt. Yeah, you're going to be doing this till you die, buddy. But there's a reason that the experience of orgasm is actually connected to death. Death. It's because you're dying into something. You're in such a deep trance. You've given your individuality over to something else. Now, you can actually experience this without needing to be having sex. It's kind of like a formula of ecstasy. Of course, when men and women get together, they really want to experience this because it's really fun. Your ego gets destroyed in the process. It's a very, very powerful experience to be in that kind of embrace. to be combining the left and the right in this way, to be combining the masculine and feminine to the point where there's just death. There's death. It can be really addictive. It can feel amazing. But if there is no compassion, then this is going to turn into a weapon at some point. It is. But let's see. The word Karan is actually connected to the Sanskrit word antakarana. There is a connection here. Karan and antakarana have a connection. The antakarana is described as the reincarnating part of the mind so that it has a special link with the soul. Now, Kof, Resh, right? Moon and sun, left and right, all this. I talked about this in the Circuitry and Beyond video. The Kof Resh is where we get the Ki Rho symbol, the Greek Ki Rho. Now, it is an ancient symbol for Christ. And why is that? Well, it's the Greek letters Ki and Rho, which are directly corresponding to the Hebrew Kof and Resh. Ki Rho, Kof Resh. Now, the Ki Rho is precisely where we get the RX symbol, which is a symbol of healing, alchemy, herbalism. But of course, these days, it's turned into an evil thing because of, again, out of control science that is just mixing all kinds of stuff together and playing like it's God, and has lost its connection to the natural world, right? It's lost its connection to the natural world. But originally, that's what this was about. It's even connected to the Eye of Horus. It was called the Wadjet. And it was sort of like the ancient Egyptians' RX symbol. It's a symbol of wholeness, healing, you know. You could say like soul retrieval, possibly. If you feel like you've been, you know, torn up by the world, getting in touch with the Wadjet can help bring wholeness to your existence again, wholeness. It's very, very healing. In the same way Jesus is healing. In the same way this Ki Rho is a symbol for Christ, healing, compassion, you know, very important. But another interesting thing is that this is also where we get the symbol of the skull and crossbones. Now, I know that might seem kind of strange because the skull and crossbones is supposed to be a symbol of death and poison. Well, it is. You know, you don't want to drink anything with a skull and crossbones on it. But originally, it is a symbol that has ancient roots, okay? The skull and crossbones symbol has ancient roots, very esoteric roots. When we think of the left and the right in terms of this decisiveness, the scales, being able to look at the this and the that, that's a really interesting thing because that's actually what the left and the right is with the masculine and feminine. It's just that when you look at, I mean, it's even accounted for in the right as well with the two towers. That's really fascinating. And these dualities, like the Kof, Resh, bringing them together in order to bring wholeness and healing, you want to be able to have decisive knowledge and knowing what you want, what you really want, not just what your ego wants, but what you really want by knowing the truth. Because when you know the truth, you can make better informed decisions. Much, much, much better informed decisions. And you can navigate this horizontal world in a much better way. Much, much better. Much more of a leader. Really leading the way with actual compassion. Real healing. Real healing. So, you could think of this also as the hook and the flail that's crossed over the Pharaoh's chest, like with King Tut here. The hook is the shepherd's staff that leads forward, right? Leftness, the shepherd's staff that leads forward. It's logical circuitry. Logical circuitry is more future-oriented. It's trying to ensure a better future. It's trying to ensure tomorrow. As long as we can survive into tomorrow, everything will be great. And it's also about wisdom, having wisdom about moving forward. Great wisdom is so important, like the wisdom of the 48th hexagram in the spleen, which is part of logical circuitry again. Then we have the flail. Ouch. The flail is about learning from mistakes. And it's about how it can sting. Your past mistakes and things you've been through emotionally can hurt, but they can also be a guiding thing at the same time. You learn from things you've went through in the past. And sacrificing yourself, quote unquote, for the greater good is kind of like the flail thing. It doesn't mean, it's not like a punishment. It's not like punishing yourself in like a you're bad kind of way, like, oh, I'm going to whip myself because I'm so bad. You know, it's not about that. It's about understanding suffering. Understanding suffering. That's what compassion is. That's what Anthony Williams said, that the source that gives him all of his information, the spirit of compassion, that's what it told him compassion is. The understanding of suffering. That is what compassion is. The understanding of suffering. Now, here we have it right here with the left and the right. Understanding circuit, logical circuitry, logical understanding circuit, and suffering, understanding suffering. Suffering is different than pain. You know, you can feel physical pain. Suffering is a completely different thing. There are a lot of Buddhists out there who transcend suffering. You know, they transcend suffering in the sense that they could feel physical pain, but it's not causing them suffering, right? Suffering is an emotional thing. It's very, very deeply emotional. It's like soul hurt. And people can feel this in so many different ways. It's not just if you have pain with the sciatica, or you had your heart broke, or you have crippling anxiety, or other kind of maybe a spiritual malady of some kind. That is suffering through and through. We also have these fascinating statues on Boa Island off the coast of Ireland. I wrote about this on my Neptune page. If you go to tarotica.net/Neptune, this is very much what it's connected to. You know, there's fascinating connections between Ireland and Egypt, actually. And this crossing over the chest, right? And this head on top, that's literally what this is. Kof means back of head, subconscious. Reish means head, consciousness. It's a fascinating thing. So we have Reish, right? The head, the row, or the Reish. And then we have this Kof, which is the cross underneath it. Very fascinating that. And when you bring them together, Kof Reish, it's like gnosis. It's like a powerful alchemy. There's a powerful thing about it. When you look at these statues on Boa Island, there's two of them. There's another one facing the other direction. One of them is masculine, the other one is feminine. The one that is facing toward the east, he actually has a small phallus. The one that's facing toward the west, it doesn't have a phallus. So it's showing this masculine and feminine stuff. These are ancient statues too. These are very, very ancient statues. Whoever carved these statues, they wanted to make a physical representation of their knowledge, the knowledge that they have of the combination of masculine and feminine, having balance within yourself. Very deep alchemy. This is a painting by Akiana Krameric called I Am. I Am. I love this painting. Crossing the arms over the chest like this, right? The head and the cross underneath it. I am. Radiating light. I just love this picture. I don't know. She's a very gifted artist. I mean, she's really painting from another dimension, but while artistically bringing it into this dimension, because sometimes she'll have a vision in a dream. See? Sometimes she'll have a vision in a dream. and it'll be so inspiring. But when she starts painting it, it starts to take on a life of its own, and it doesn't necessarily look exactly like how she saw it in her vision or her dream. That's what art is about. Creating something that like takes on a life of its own, the act of you actually doing it in the moment. In the moment, it's like, it's amazing to be able to, you know, be that spontaneous and to get into that spirit of spontaneity. That's really a beautiful thing. I am. The I am presence. It's beyond conditions. It's not about conditions, the I am presence. It's your connection to heaven. It's your connection to a higher power, God, source, whatever you want to call it. That I am presence that is within you. The knowledge that is within you. This very, very deep knowledge. It's all within you. And connecting to it is going to be a very important thing, because there are beings out there that find all of this inexplicable and incomprehensible and don't even respect it. All they care about is what they want. It's really important. I mean, I've been getting pretty deep into the Allies of Humanity stuff, and it is so accurate and sober. Sober. Think about that. It is very, very sober writing for channeling or for a kind of message coming through somebody. When you look at the law of attraction stuff, boy, is it drunk. It is wasted, and it's trying to get you in that state of mind too. It's all about just, you know, reckless self-abandonment. Yeah, it's okay. Just, it's all about pleasure and getting the perfect lover and getting what you want and doing what you want. And no. Yeah, that's nice. That's good. You can have that. But, you know, there's something else going on that I think is really, really important for people to be aware of. Our spiritual inheritance with all of this is under a kind of threat. It's under a kind of threat, and only human unity is going to save it. And like I said, we're going to be going into certain kinds of shock in order to get to that level of unity, with certain things that are going to be happening in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, possibly in the next 7 years. So that's the first part. We can stop it there. That's the first part. There's a whole second part that we can get to at a later date. But yeah, that was the end of part 1.